Hi and welcome to part 2 of my camera experiments. The setup for this video is as close to part 1 as I could manage. The same train, lighting and camera positions have been selected. Instead of a third camera showing the setup, I shall use the camera that's not involved in the test to show you what's going on. In this video I'm going to change some of the camera settings to try and optimise and deal with some of the issues identified in part 1. Starting with the TZ35, I'm going to set it to speed priority mode and turn off continuous autofocus to see if it resolves the focus drift issue. We're now filming on the TZ35. I've given it the chance to focus up on the locomotive, and now I'm going to run it away and then back past a few times to see what the results are. Remember, we're looking out for focus flare on the various tracks, particularly the close one. And there's the locomotive back. Hopefully we will have achieved a focus drift free video. Now setting up the Sony SR58. This is all done by touchscreen. The first thing I'm going to do is try and manually set the white balance. It has an option called one push. Basically what you do is give it something white to look at and then select the button again, this one here, so that the camera adjusts for how white looks exactly. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm using a sheet of white paper to achieve this. So let's press the adjustment and see what happens. So we've now told the camera what white looks like under this lighting conditions. The lights are supposed to be balanced for daylight settings. They're proper video lights. But nonetheless, we'll see if this has made a difference to the video. We're now actually filming with the Sony SR58, having adjusted the white balance manually. So let's go ahead and move the locomotive back and forward a few times and see what happens. Okay, that's that test out of the way. The next thing I'm going to do is switch off auto exposure to see if it stops the exposure drift we saw in part 1. You're now viewing the same scene after I've switched off auto exposure and manually increased the exposure by 2 stops. Looking at the small display monitor on the SR58, this appears to be correct, so we'll go ahead and move the train blast a couple of times again. Okay, just looking at that, my observation was that the BP tanker, I'll just bring that back into camera shot, appears to be overexposed, but we'll have to see the finished product to confirm this. Finally, I'm going to try selecting the sport mode on this camera to see if that reduces the blur of the moving train. You're now viewing the scene with sport mode selected, manual exposure and white balance having been done manually. And finally, I'm going to leave the white balance set as it is and leave the camera in sport mode, but switch back to auto exposure so that we can compare results. We are now back to auto exposure. As an addition, I was just putting the video together and noticed that the SR58, which we're now viewing through, has a function called spot meter focus, which I have used currently. But basically you can touch within a square to get the exposure you desire. So you're now viewing it with that being pressed, so I'll just move the train again. As I'm viewing this, everything looks a bit too bright. I'm wondering if it's the blue background, the wall, that's too reflective really. Just bring the loco back in, and just for this test I'm going to dip the camera down, and I'm going to touch the spot meter focus on the cab of the train. I expect you saw the dramatic change there. And if I touch it on the wheels, again you can see it's exposing a lot more brightly. Interesting little function I didn't realise I had. If I bring the tanker back into view, we'll just press it on that. You see for the bright tank itself it goes a lot dimmer, and if I touch down on the wheels it seems very bright. We'll put that into the video and ask for your opinions on this also.